Hello again, this is Philip Kelly. I'm making another video on this issue of the cell tower at 3610 Evansville Road. It turns out that when my wife and I first discovered the Raggedy Ann and Andy Daycare Center document that conditionally rezoned this property to commercial, we put together a presentation to kind of explain the impact of that and the importance of that. And so I realized when after I made the other two videos, that I never really came back and revisited this. And even this presentation that was partially given at the Salem-Panola Library in the city of Stonecrest, I really couldn't complete it all. So I went through here and I updated it, changed some of the slides and added some updated information, and felt like it was important to go back and present this information again. Again, I appreciate anyone who's watching this to take a look at it, keep an open mind, and just remember that this is information that's being presented in whole to really show the problem with this installation as we, the residents of Heritage Estates, Bel Air Estates, and the members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church are impacted by it. So, Raggedy Ann and Andy Cell Tower, how did that happen? 3610 Evansville Road. Well, it has to do with zoning and land use. That leads us to tower height, that leads us to tower distance, and that leads us to legal challenges. So, the zoning and land use. So the zoning of the property and the application submitted by the applicant. That's what's going to be covered in this section. So here's the zoning codes and categories from DeKalb County. These are the same codes that were adopted by the city of Stonecrest when it was formed, and they're still in effect today. These still haven't changed. And so the reason I'm showing this is to demonstrate that different zoning districts fall into different character areas, and that you can't have a zoning district mismatch from its character area unless there is a condition on that property. In other words, when you look at this, you see here rural residential, and it has basically a bunch of different zoning options for rural residential. So you can have R100, R85, R75, and a bunch of other codes here. And I won't get into specifically what all these mean, but the essence of this is these are the only zonings allowed within a rural residential land use area, other than those that have conditions on them. You'll see the DU/A, it's dwelling units per acre. That's what this code is for. So let's look and see where we don't see any C2 in here. So let's try to find out where that is. Well, we find out that C2 pops up in a couple of different places. It's in town centers, so it's available there. It's in regional centers. Again, that zoning's available there. And it's in an office park. It's available there. So really, it's just available in these three areas, in the town center, the regional center, and the office park. If you have a C2 designation outside of these three areas, by definition, it must have a condition on it, and that condition must be met. So if you got a rural residential land use on your property, you can't have C2. unless it's conditioned for a specific purpose. Not for any purpose that you want, but for a specific purpose. And that's the reason for this slide. This slide is very key and elemental in this explanation and in really refuting Mr. Winston Denmark's reading of the conditional zoning document, which will become clear later. You'll also see C2 appear in the office park. You'll see C2 appear in the industrial. You'll see the C2 appear in the light industrial. And you'll see C2 appear in the RSM, which is the commercial redevelopment corridor. And you'll see C2 appear in the highway corridor. So if you're not on a highway, you're not on a commercial redevelopment, you're not on a light industrial, you're not in an industrial, you're not in a, it's not in either one of these. What's in the, I think it's in this one, yeah. You're not in an office park or regional center or town center or or not even a neighborhood center is allowed for it. If you're not in any of these and you got a C2 that's in a rural residential land use, it's got to have a condition on it. And it's not blanket, meaning you aren't allowed to put anything you want there. So we'll move on to the next map. So again, this is key, right? This is the zoning map from DeKalb County. And this shows all the properties, an overlay of all the properties that have rural residential and conservation use. And you got some subdivision use here. And then some RC, which I think is that redevelopment corridor area. And so you'll notice something. Right in this area, it's all green. Well, that's rural residential. You know, so just as was pointed out in the previous slide, no C2s allowed in rural residential in that land use. The only C2 that you can put in there is a conditional C2. You can't put in whatever you want in that rural residential land use. So that's from DeKalb County. So now we've gone to Stonecrest, right? So here we are in Stonecrest overlay map. The previous map was adopted by the city of Stonecrest. Since that time, they've developed their own maps. Things have evolved. And again, here we are again, right? We're looking at an overlay area. We're looking at the Arabian Mountain District, right? And again, it's rural residential. You know, it still hasn't changed. That land use is still rural residential. So whether you're looking at DeKalb County's map or you're looking at City of Stonecrest map, it's the same story. It's rural residential. So now moving on to the next slide. All right, so this is the zoning district from DeKalb County. Again, rural residential. You can see this one's kind of an off color. Reason it's an off color, it's not totally red, it's not totally green, it's kind of an off color because that means that is a conditional specific C2 land use. It's not bright red like some of these down here that are excluded and don't have any conditions. This one's got a very specific purpose associated with it, and that's just for a Raggedy Ann and Andy Daycare Center. So now we'll go on to future land use City of Stonecrest. So this is where it gets really odd, right? So again, this is our target area that we're looking at, and the future land use is conservation open space. It's not C2, you know. It's really odd that a commercial development would even be approved within this area at all, because it's not zoned for that. It's not zoned within the Arabian Mountain overlay. It's not zoned within the future land use. It wasn't previously zoned that way. So it's really bizarre that one would think that is general commercial use based on either the overlay or based on either the future land use or even based on the conditional zoning document. But we'll move on. We'll look at some more maps. Okay, so this is the 3610 Evans Mill Road from DeKalb County. And again, it gives you the owner, REO Funding Solutions III, which was the owner at the time. It gives you the total value. It gives you the tax district. It gives you the zoning of C2. And so people would be like, well, how could they get C2 in there? It doesn't seem to jive, right? Because the land use is rural residential. Remember what we just looked at, the first slide. The graph that showed that rural residential isn't, or C2 isn't allowed in rural residential. Well, the reason why is this zoning condition. Conditional Zoning 76082. So Mr. Winston Denmark's contention is that the conditions don't apply because it doesn't if I get it straight, okay, I'm going to try to quote him directly. If it doesn't rise to the level of what's required by Georgia state law, then the conditions are unenforceable. Great. So that means you don't get the C2. You have to be R100. Because remember, it's rural residential land use. So you can't put any development you want in here. You either have to put in a commercial development that's in line with the condition, and if the conditions can't be enforced or don't apply, then that means you don't get the C2. Those are married. Those are connected intimately. You don't get the zoning without the condition because it doesn't match the land use. And that's the key and important point here, is that as long as you have a land use of rural residential, you either put in a commercial operation that fits this condition, or if you say these conditions don't work and this document fails, then this goes back to R100 because you have no other option. You've got a rural residential land use and you're not allowed to put in a strip mall or a cell phone tower. That's essentially what that means. So now at this point one would say, well, hey, that's from DeKalb County. This is the city of Stonecrest now. Well, let's look at the next slide. Here's 3610 Evansville Road for city of Stonecrest. GIS map. Okay, so zoning, again C2. Zoning condition, CZ76082. Future land use, rural residential. Overlay, Arabian Mountain Overlay District. Again, it's the same deal. It hasn't changed any. And the reason why is because this zoning and this land use was adopted by the city of Stonecrest. And that's why they show on here rural residential. It's all the same. Either way that you slice it. It's the same parcel number, same plat number, everything. They've kind of changed the graphics and they've rearranged things. But this is the same kind of deal. Hasn't really changed any. So we'll go on to the next slide. So here's the application that was put in for the conditional zoning. And I know that Mr. Winston Denmark said, well, the condition doesn't control, or the application doesn't control, the minutes control. However, I think it's important that we look at this because there's a key element to this that's being overlooked by a lot of people. The application is very specific in terms of to conditionally rezone property located on south side of Evans Mill Road, 300 southwest of Ragsdale Road, from R100 to C2 for a summer day camp for children. All right, and then it goes on and gives a bunch of detail. That is the application. They're applying to have it conditionally rezoned. But one thing people have forgotten is that down here, there's this little area called decision. Decision. So the decision that was made based on this application was, motion was made by Commissioner Lanier, seconded by Commissioner Coolidge, and was unanimously passed to approve the application as conditioned by applicant. I mean, you can't get any clearer than that. That's just a dead ringer right there. As conditioned by applicant doesn't mean anything other than this application. That's on the same page. You know, exact same page. To say that this is somehow referring to a conversation in a hallway or some other piece of paper is preposterous. But even if it was, let's say that that was the case, and we don't know what this condition is. Fine. It's not a cell phone tower either. You know, you can't use this conditional zoning to say, since I have no idea what as conditioned by applicant means, then I'm going to put whatever I want on there. It doesn't work that way. You know, you either have to go with this as the condition, or you get no condition at all, which means you don't even get the C2. You have to revert the property to R100, because then the entire document falls apart and fails. Let's go to the next slide. So here in the next slide, this is an excerpt from the minutes of the meeting. This is the conditional zoning from the minutes. All right, conditional zoning number, map reference number, gives the location, gives the usage. From R100 to C2 for a summer day camp for children. And then the applicant's name, then the action by the Planning Commission. Approved as conditioned by applicant. Again, the only reason this appears here by applicant is because this line in the usage is taken straight out of the application. You don't have to assume that that comes from somewhere else. And let's say that it did. Let's say that as conditioned by applicant meant something different. Well, we don't know what that means. You know, that could mean anything, right? Well, if you say that it doesn't mean this, then that means that it never got rezoned to C2. Because you can't take it from R100 to C2 just by saying, I don't know what the condition is, so I just want to keep approval. It doesn't work that way. You know, if there's an approval as conditioned by applicant, you either accept what this document says in whole, or you don't accept any of it, one bit. And then action by Board of Commissioners. Again, approved as conditioned. It doesn't say by applicant there because they don't need to. It's obvious. Approved as conditioned. What's the condition? From R100 to C2 for a summer day camp for children. That's obvious right there. It's not for a cell phone tower. And the reason it's not for a cell phone tower will become obvious later on in the discussion. So here's the permitted towers for zoning. And this is why C2 matters. Okay. So there's industrial conditions, communication utilities, and wireless telecommunications cell towers. All right. It gives you a bunch of different little zonings up here at the top. Right. C2's over here, way down on this end. R100's right here. So we follow R100 down, and we look and we see if you can have a support structure, a new support structure or stealth design up to 199 feet. It turns out that's not allowed. You can't get one at all. There's no special land use permit that can do that. There's no special administrative permit can you do that. There's no permitted use, and there's no permitted as an accessory use. So if you wanted, right, to get a stealth design up to 150 feet on the property used for non-residential purposes, you could get a special land use permit to do that. But that would also require a hearing, right? And that lowers the power and transmitter size, and it has a lot of other impacts for the installation. We don't have that. We don't have 150 foot on that property. We've got a new support structure of stealth design at 199 feet. So what they did is they said, well, gee, we really, 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 really want this. So, hey, we'll come down here and we'll use this C2 designation right here, right down here, and use a special authorization permit to get that new support structure of 199 feet on that property with no notice and no notification to anybody. And the reason why they said that they could do that is because their reading of that document is C2 with no conditions at all. That's why they did that. And that's why they're so married to the idea of it's got to be C2, is because in their permitted use grid, you can't have that tower. You can't have it at all, right? It's not allowed at all. They have to chop off 49 feet and reissue a special land use permit. I did an open records request and there haven't been any issued. All they did was a special authorization permit. So that was the purpose of showing this slide, was to show what's allowed and what isn't allowed. Going on to the next slide. So here's a kind of a cutoff of the top of the application. The reason why I brought this in is because I wanted to show a couple of things. You know, there's the tax parcel ID again, the tract, 3610 Evans Mill Road. I want to show that it's a commercial building permit application. And that all they put on here was C2. They did not bother to write the condition down. So why is that important? Well, that makes this application incomplete, because that C2 zoning doesn't exist without that condition on it. They're tied to each other. So the fact that they left the document number of CZ76082 makes this an incomplete application. So now you say, well, why is that important? Well, let's look at the bottom of the application. So here's the bottom. This is the indemnification for the city of Stonecrest, and this is where I start to scratch my head on the city's decision on this. There's a certification, and there's a big old paragraph there, all right, but it's basically, you know, I hereby certify that I've read and examined all information herein is true and correct. Okay, so that's the key element. You can put down something that you think is true, but it may not necessarily be correct. So whether or not the person who signed this signed it off as saying, yeah, I think it's true, is not relevant in this case. The fact is it's not correct. And so here's the key thing, okay? This last sentence, I agree to indemnify and hold harmless the city of Stonecrest from all damages, demands, or expenses of every character which may in any manner be caused by the work permitted. I mean, they're indemnified, essentially. If any information is found to be false or misrepresented, the permit will be deemed invalid. You got it right there. I mean, that's basically it. You know, it's not, they didn't have a valid permit to put that tower up. And if the city files a code enforcement complaint against them or directs them to remove the tower based on a code violation, they can't really sue the city because they've already indemnified the city against harm, because they went through and they made an application for a structure on a piece of property claiming that it was C2 when they knew full well that it wasn't. And so this communications tower purpose right there under C2, knowing that that's conditionally zoned, is a fraudulent application. It's either known that way or it's that way because it was a mistake. But to make the claim that this property is a commercial district is just incorrect. It's just not true and correct. It doesn't fit the facts, and the facts is defined by the zoning of the property. It's not my opinion. It's not the opinion of, you know, people in the neighborhood. It's just the way that it is. So we'll go on to the next slide, which talks about the tower design. So this is the problem about doing it this way and approving this and saying, oh gee, Phil, you know, it's just a cell tower, come on. You know, cell tower, schmell tower, what does that matter? Well, it turns out that size does matter, not just in terms of the height, but in terms of the power that's allowed to be licensed on that tower. So this is what was installed. This was, again, obtained through the open records request. It's a structural design report. It's a 195-foot monopole. They call this site Flat Rock, Georgia, because it's near a creek called Flat Rock. It's prepared by Vertical Bridge. It's Sabra towers and poles. And then it's got a job number and then a date, showing that this has been in the works for a while, like 2017. So this isn't a new project. This is a project that they worked on for some time and had been working with the city on for quite some time. So looking into this tower design, what they've installed is a tower that can hold up to 4 antenna arrays. So 4 antenna arrays. As you go up the tower, you pay more money, right? So if you rent the top spot, you're going to pay a little bit more than if you rent the spot one step down from the top or the spot another step down from there. So if you go from 188.75 feet down to 178.75 feet, you pay a little bit less money. And then 168.75 feet, you pay a little bit less money. Then 158.75 feet, you pay a little bit less money. So, why is it a big deal? Okay, you can have up to 4 antenna arrays on there. Well, the problem is that that's typical for a commercial district, but not for a residential area. You know, generally speaking, a residential tower, you really only get 1 antenna array. You know, here they can have 4. And the reason why that they can have 4 is because the FCC is making an assumption that this co-location facility isn't going to be in the middle of homes and right next to a playground and a school and a church. You know, commercial districts don't pop up in those areas. And so they allowed for this because they don't know where this is actually going. So let's go on to the next slide and take a look. Alright, this is another view of the antenna arrays. Again, it shows the 4 antenna arrays that can be put on this tower. gives you the tower design, the installation specifications, the type of lightning rod, the elevation, type of square inch type. So aperture, loading designs. Again, just to kind of show the array and how they will be configured on the tower eventually. Probably throughout this year. We've already got the one array installed on the top of the tower. So commercial power per antenna array, again, height matters. All right, so how many watts is a cell tower? Although the FCC permits an effective radiated power of up to 500 watts per channel, depending on the tower height, the majority of cellular or PCS cell sites in urban and suburban areas operate at an ERP of 100 watts per channel or less. So, the key thing in this slide is depending on the tower height. So the problem is that if you cheat the system and you say that an area is commercial when it isn't, you can crank out a lot more power. You're allowed by the FCC to do that now. And this thing's going to be right next to a playground. And that's the problem, is that this is not in a residential area or in a commercial area. This is in a residential area. This doesn't have metal buildings. People don't drive up in their metal car, park in the parking lot, and then walk into a metal building. Kids play out on a playground right underneath this tower. And we're going to show that in a couple more slides. So that's the importance. That's the reason why height matters. It really does make a difference in terms of what the FCC permits as an effective radiated power. And so the guys, the people working at the city of Stonecrest, they don't know this. They just don't. Because if they knew this, they wouldn't have approved this. And they certainly wouldn't be saying, oh yeah, that's a commercial tract of land with no conditions. They would realize the mistake that they're making. But because they don't get this detail, they don't really know what's happening here. And the danger that they're exposing the children in the neighborhood and in that school and on that playground and that church too. So that brings us to the next topic, tower distance. It's just too close to properly mitigate risk. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. It really is. So we know that the tower height matters. We know that it can go up to the maximum that the FCC permits because it's a taller tower. So let's take a look at that. This is a little bit of a dangers of living near a cell phone tower clip from the internet. If you live within a quarter mile of a cell phone antenna tower, you may be at risk of serious harm to your health, according to a German study cited at www.emfhealth.com. So why is that a big deal? Well, I clipped it out. Here's a quarter mile. Here's that in feet. 1,320 feet. Okay. Those are the same. Right. Now let's go on to the next slide. And bear in mind, this is talking about really a residential cell tower, not a commercial one. This one's the big, 199 foot tall cell phone tower. So let's take a look at that. All right, so this is kind of a Google shot of a Google Earth shot of the SDA church, their school right back here, and their gym right back in here, and then the big open field where they play, and then the playground right here, and all these trees back in here in the neighborhood that I live in. All right, the houses weren't built at the time. The tower sits effectively right about here, right in this area. That's really close to those where those kids are playing. It's also really close to these residences. So I went ahead and I went to the DeKalb County maps, and it gives you a measurement tool so that you can find out exactly what the distance is. So here's the base of that cell tower, the base. All right. One of my neighbor's houses that lives right down here, her house is 441 feet away. This neighbor's house right here is 401 feet away. This length right here is the length to my house, 1,011.79 feet away. This length right here is the length to that playground, 449 feet away. And this length right here is the length to the church, 728.93 feet away. And this length right here is 486.27 feet away. So pretty much everybody is within that quarter-mile distance. Except for me, I'm off. Well, no, I'm within the quarter-mile distance too. I'm off the page, but I'm still there. I'm 1,011 feet away. Because remember, quarter mile, it's 1,300 feet. So this is less than, the base of that tower is less than 500 feet away from that kid's playground. If they're out here playing in this field, they're even closer than that. You know, if they're in the gym, they're closer than that. If they're in the school, they're maybe 500 feet away. You know, no, probably more like 600. If they're in the church, they're 728.93 feet away. So this is a bad idea to do this, to locate this type of tower this close to all these residences, this playground, this church, the school, you know, even another home over here, another pre-existing home. So, you know, you look at this map and you just think, what were they thinking? So we'll go on to the next slide. Basically, the bottom line on this is a commercial cell phone tower in a residential neighborhood that will produce up to 2,000 watts of effective radiated power transmitted out into the air. That's what effective radiated power means. This is simply too much power in too close a proximity to homes, a school, and a church. And it really is. 2,000 watts of transmitter power that close to those homes and that playground and that school and that church. I mean, it's just unconscionable to say that this is okay. So this should be a residential tower that is shorter and limited to less effective radiated power. Understand, if this was a 150-foot tall residential tower, it could not have 4 antenna arrays. Right? Even if you took 3 of them off and you said you can still go up to the maximum, which it isn't allowed, by the way, it would only be 100 watts. This one's going to be allowed to be 2,000 watts of effective radiated power when they fill the tower out. There's no reason why they won't do that. And so that's what makes this so wrong, is this tower's placement in such close proximity to a neighborhood and a school and a church. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen anywhere. This is not just unusual, this is bizarrely unusual. This is more than unusual. This is really, really strange. And so their attempt to use the commercial zoning to sneak this tower in has effectively put a lot of children at risk and a lot of residents at risk. And I don't think that the people who made this decision fully appreciate or understand what they did. So, the legal challenge: support needed and resource links. Here's the deal. The city of Stonecrest has abandoned us. You know, they look at this little new neighborhood and they say, well, those residents haven't been here that long. And they look at that church, Seventh-day Adventist church, and they say, well, that's a little church. We don't care about them. And the truth is they really don't. Because they came out with a legal decision basically that said, yeah, having that cell phone tower there is fine. You know, and so, you know, we're going to have to bring a suit against them. We don't have any other option. We have worked tirelessly with the city of Stonecrest, their council members, the mayor, I guess you call it the bureaucrats in the city of Stonecrest. I don't say that in a mean or nasty way. I mean bureaucrats in terms of the people that work in the office there. And we just can't get anywhere with them. Honestly, we have really, really tried. I've worked a lot of hours at work, and I've gone to council meetings exhausted and made speeches to them and talks to them and tried to explain all this to them, and they just won't listen. That's just all there is to it. And so here's the basis of the legal challenge. You know, based on the zoning document, this is not a commercial property, but is conditionally zoned that way for a daycare center for children. So the size and power of the cell tower is not allowed in a residential zone, primarily for safety reasons. That's why it's not supposed to be there. And we have done our best to work with the city of Stonecrest, but they have decided to side with the developer vertical bridge. Bottom line, that's what they've decided. And, you know, I don't know how we could ever change their mind. I really don't. And so we have an agreement for legal counsel through Weissman, but we just lack the funds to pursue the lawsuit. So this is the point of this slide. To donate to this effort, you know, please visit the GoFundMe page at GoFundMe.com/removal of Stonecrest cell phone tower. That's GoFundMe.com/removal of Stonecrest cell phone tower. To just open the case, we need $5,000 just to open the case. Right now, we got $515. That's all that we got. I mean, I'm very thankful to the people that have donated, but the bottom line is we need a lot more people to donate. And so the challenge is, we're not doing this off the cuff. We're not doing this because we want to dive right in. We've tried everything. We've tried every other option that we could, and at this point, we don't have any choice but to ask for your help. We really need help from across the country to try and prevent this from becoming a tragedy. Because the reality is that if we can't sue the city of Stonecrest and the developer to get that tower removed and relocated, the next video you're going to be watching is going to be 3 to 5 years from now about a cancer cluster in the city of Stonecrest. And that's just the truth. You know, unfortunately, based on the size and power and the location of this tower, it's highly unlikely that this isn't going to do some real damage to a lot of the kids living out here. That's just the way that it is. So, if you can give whatever you can. That's all that I'm asking. And the last slide is thank you for listening and watching. You know, any support that you can give, it's really, really, really appreciated. If you can't give money, share the video. Maybe someone who can give money will see it and they'll donate. But this is really where we are. We're at a point now where we really don't have any other options. This is our last option, because, as I said before, the city of Stonecrest has just abandoned everyone at Heritage Estates and Bel Air Estates and Lithonia Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that's their position. I don't want to say that they don't care, but they're callous is really what it comes down to. So give what you can, support us any way that you can, and just thank you and God bless you for listening. I really, really do appreciate it, and have a great day.